Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben. These are my tomes, and today we're going to look at everything I read for Summerween 2026. If you're not familiar with Summerween, it is a yearly readathon in July to read spooky books. I have tried to arrange my entries by the different prompts for the readathon, starting with a book I read at night, which is What Feasts at Night, the sequel to What Moves the Dead, which is a previous book I read for a Summerween or a Winterween at night. Listen to the audiobook of this one just like I did for the previous one, and it was good. I liked it. I feel like the first book in this series is a little bit stronger. This book does kind of pull one of my least favorite horror tropes, which is making it to where it's very unclear whether or not the supernatural elements present are real or viable. It's still hinted at the end that the supernatural was in effect, and for what it's worth, I really do want the supernatural elements to have happened and to be real, and I don't understand all this like pulling back on that kind of story, but I feel like it's a real common trend in contemporary horror. So anyway, this is a gothic horror book set in a forest cottage in a fictional country that I think is supposed to basically be reminiscent of Eastern Europe kind of thing. Eastern Europe kind of vibe as far as the atmosphere they're trying to build here. It does reference the previous book quite a number of times, but I feel like even if you hadn't read What Moves the Dead, you could still understand what's going on in the story. You could still follow the characters and their exploits. And they do take the time to reintroduce you to the characters, despite being a novella. It's not too terribly long. Let's say the audiobook for this was 5 hours. So as things go, pretty quick. There are definitely parts of the listening experience that were creating the kind of tension and macabre feel that I want to get out of books like this. Some truly grotesque imagery, particularly toward the end of the book, which I really appreciated. I think this one ended at a 3-star for me. I'd recommend it if you have already read the first in the series, and I am going to continue with the series, so it was good, just not anything outstanding or exceptional. For my official horror or thriller book for this Summerween, I chose Ice Cream Man Sunday Edition Volume 1, which is essentially the first 3 trade paperbacks of the series put into one hardcover edition. Now, there is a second one of these out that I am really interested in getting at this point, but I'm not sure past that if there's going to be more. The writer has talked about the difficulty in getting these kind of special editions made. I went into this knowing quite a bit about Ice Cream Man and the reputation it has within the comic book community, how it is pushing the envelope a lot with the way that stories are told through the comic book medium, and it did not disappoint in that regard, or any regard really. This was, if anything, more than I was hoping for. I knew this was going to be kind of a Twilight Zone-esque storytelling thing, where each issue is like a small vignette of some sort of horrific thing happening around this town, punctuated by the appearance of the Ice Cream Man, who is the antagonist of this series, although he doesn't seem to directly interfere in every instance. He is set up as kind of the big bad behind a lot of the horrific goings on in this town. And that was the part that really grabbed me and was surprising. It's how much we went into the lore of Ice Cream Man in this omnibus. There is a whole section that kind of discusses his origin story, although it is very esoteric and a little bit difficult to follow. And then there is a set of stories in the end that take place during different time periods, one set in the future, which gives more of a hint of where Ice Cream Man is going to end up later and where the story is ultimately heading, although it's not really what's going to happen to this particular town that he finds himself in most of the stories, but more of like the larger narrative of who Ice Cream Man is and the forces that are trying to stand against him. As far as the stories go, there is an issue in here that has 3 different stories running simultaneously. One of which is like completely bonkers, and then it kind of pulls back from there. I really enjoyed that one. There are some with kind of weird left turns at the end, but they're all hinted at, so they're not complete non sequiturs, which I found really entertaining. There was that set at the end that were different time periods. There was one that was a good deal of the comic was in Spanish, and I did not know that at the end of the book they have the translation for the Spanish, so I just kind of like went along with it, understanding like I was going to get the whole story, but I could follow a little bit of it. That was a fun experience. I rather liked that. If you are in the market for a new horror comic and you have not yet checked out Ice Cream Man, this is going to be right up there with Something is Killing the Children, Nights, and Bunny Mask for me as like my go-to horror comic recommendation. 5 out of 5 stars, an excellent read. For my book with a pink cover, I chose How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates, which was fine. This is the story of a couple of girlfriends who go out for a speed dating night, and as they are talking with like the second to last person, the lights go out, they come back on, one person's dead, the doors are all locked, panic ensues, and they have to, do the typical slasher run around, try to find an exit to escape kind of thing while they're being hunted down by a masked killer. As far as the premise goes, love it. Excellent. The main character is in academia. She is studying the intersection of rom-coms and horror, which have a surprising amount of overlap, honestly, especially when you're talking about like the use of irony. Her character did a much better job than the last book I read of presenting someone who is genre savvy and kind of knows what should be done, but also like recognizes that in the real world, maybe not all of the examples from movies are actually going to work. Couple of problems. The first is, while the slow buildup of tension as the victims are kind of meandering around a confined space might work in film and like work to ratchet up the tension and to build up, expectations, reading it is super boring. The beginning of this book, once the kill, like the initial kills happen, that part of the book is incredibly slow and so boring to read. They're basically like walking around the building and describing what the building's like and why it's so crazy and labyrinthian and why they can't find an exit. And yeah, it doesn't work on paper. It doesn't work as a book. The other issue is that there are some things that I feel like are projected rather early that are then treated as surprises later, which is fine. Like that's the risk you run in kind of dropping different hints early on in the story. But I feel like it really undercut a lot of the surprise factor that happened later, especially since it is so beholden to the tropes of actual horror cinema. If you've watched Scream or you've watched Halloween, you've watched these different slasher films, you can probably see where the story is going, which is kind of a good and bad thing. Like, it makes sense and it should work, but it's also runs the risk of kind of losing a little bit of that interest, lose a little bit of that oomph. And it doesn't help that literally every single character is named after some sort of horror icon, whether that is the actress who played the character's name, directors, and it's all kind of like smashed together. It's just kind of like a hodgepodge of like name dropping, which was cute the first couple of times, but when like every single character works that way, it kind of becomes a diluted thing and kind of becomes a little bit of a mess. This did come around at the end. I did think the final confrontation between Jamie and the killer was a lot of fun, and really, like, I was laughing out loud. It did do a good job of marrying the rom-com and like horror tropes and kind of explaining how they work together. So like it pulled it out in the end, because for the longest time I was going to give this a 2. It was not working for me. It was so dull just running around and trying to like figure out how to get out of this place. But the end really worked for me, brought it back up to 3 stars. I would like to read the next book in the series, which I think already has a blurb on Goodreads, but it's not going to be high on my TBR. It's going to be something I can wait for. If you are a fan of rom-coms and slashers with honestly more weight on the slasher end of that, I think you can find enjoyment out of this book. You'll get a kick out of some of the things that are going on here, and you'll definitely appreciate the nods to horror cinema. If not, I would give this a pass. I think that if you're not in it for the like slasher references and the rom-com talk, then it's not going to work for you. For my book for a new to me author, I chose Teddy Bears Never Die by Cho Yoon. This is a Korean author. I don't think this is their first translated work, though the translator mentioned some other things that they've worked on in the past for the same author. But I think it might be their first horror book that has come over. Really weird. It has to do with like mediums and a spirit possessing a teddy bear. This never happens, by the way. There's never a huge teddy bear. He's teddy bear size. He's small size. He's small. He fits in backpack. This is a little bit of a mashup of like a horror, this time more of a supernatural horror, and a little bit of like a teen romance in here as well, because the two characters here have a little bit of a history together. It's nothing overt, and it doesn't culminate in anything more than like a strong friendship, maybe something that will develop a little bit more, which I also appreciated. But it was definitely there, and I felt like it was in service to the larger narrative. This focuses on a couple of kids from very different worlds. One is living in kind of the slums of the town after the death of her mother, which is allegedly from this larger poisoning incident that happened, but there's some question early on over whether or not that really happened, if that was the reason why she died. The other character, the one who's stuck in the body of a teddy bear, he is the nephew of the mayor, so he lives in kind of the upscale area of town, but his life is also touched by tragedy. His parents also got killed in this poisoning attack, and there's some question about what happened there as well. So they're kind of united in this quest for vengeance and this quest for answers, because especially in the girl's case, she is explicitly out to find out what happened to her mother, and if she can find that someone is responsible for it, she is going to kill them. That is her entire goal. That's her entire thrust throughout the book. The boy is trying to figure out why he a teddy bear? Why is he in the body of a teddy bear? And those answers actually relate to each other. So there's a little bit of a mystery element going on with this as well, which I found engaging and definitely made me want to continue reading. This does fall into what I feel is a common writing pattern coming out of Asia, which is just a lot of like info dumping about characters and their past and their like ancestry and things like that as a way to propel the story forward. So you'll start up a new chapter, it'll be like, oh, this girl's grandmother was really like this, and that impacted her mother because of this, and these things happened in her mother's life, and that's why she ended up the way that she is. And you'll have this whole elaborate backstory kind of just like fed to you as a flashback, as like a big info dump in the book. And it happens multiple times. Like, that's just the way that a lot of storytelling in these types of books go. I feel like a lot of other things I read had a similar feel to them, like Confessions, I feel like was a similar thing of like each character had like, okay, here's the long story of what I did, and then here's a long story of my perception of what was going on. So expect that. If that's not your thing, if you've read other things out of Japan or Korea that are doing that and you did not care for it, know that that is also present in this book. I'm also very interested in the way that different monster titles were translated for this book, because there is the concept of spirits and zombies and ghosts and other things like that. And I'm wondering if in the original Korean there were different names for these things, because at least my understanding of like Japanese folklore and monsters, there's a difference between like yurei, which are the ghosts and spirits, and the yokai, which are like the monsters. And we don't really have a similar dichotomy, a different categorization in the West. And so we're using these terms like demon and ghost and spirit and those types of things. And I'm wondering if they had distinct ideas, distinct categories within a Korean understanding, a Korean framework. So overall, really enjoyed this one. Gave it 4 stars. It was weird, which is what I wanted from it, and wild, and had some like crazy like action parts to it. Some really horrific descriptions of terrible things that happen to people, despite being grotesque at times and being a little bit grungy, a little bit focused on the negative aspects of gentrification and like this focus on like the seedier parts of town. I felt like it told a really poignant story that really worked for me, and I liked it quite a lot. I would definitely pick it up if you want something a little bit different from your horror and something with just as much heart as it has like supernatural scares. And finally, for my novella, I chose by my own volition to read Nothing But Blackened Teeth, which was known to me as a particularly bad book. My wife has been talking to me for a good while, ever since she finished, about how much she disliked this book, but how much she wants me to read it, because like misery loves company, right? So she wanted me to read it so I could experience just the wild craziness that is going on in this story. From top to bottom, this doesn't work. It is probably the worst thing that I've read it's definitely this year, but probably in the last like 5 years, I would argue. It's really bad. The characters are all insufferable. They are purported to be friends. They all hate each other. They all immediately, start coming to blows and blowing up at each other, calling each other names, like as soon as anything even mildly distressing happens. I don't see why they were ever friends. I don't see why they're a friend group. It did not work. The prose is so overwritten, and you can write, you can do purple prose, you can do overwritten like academic prose if it works for your character, and it doesn't work for this character. All of the protagonist's like inner monologue, all her inner thoughts, the way that she thinks, contrast sharply with all the description that's going around, and it's supposedly from her perspective. So it just creates this contrast that doesn't work. Like, I don't understand why the descriptions in here are so verbose when the main character is not like that's not how she talks. That's not how she thinks. That's not how she acts. It doesn't come from anything, and it honestly gets in the way of the story. This one, similar to the last book, it deals with yokai, it deals with Japanese monsters, does not stop to tell you about what any of them are. If I was not already familiar with yokai, I would have to be getting, Wikipedia up or something, going online and searching for what is this monster? What is this word? What is this thing we're talking about? It would be nearly incomprehensible. Plot-wise, doesn't work. Makes no sense. The ending comes out of nowhere. It is predicated on something working at the last minute that has no right to work. That is not, the story does not suggest that it in any way should result in what happens. And then ultimately it ends with like a kind of like everybody is okay, mostly, and then they kind of just move on and nobody seems to care. It was really bizarre. It was really weird. I agree with my wife that the most interesting character is the ghost. Doesn't do anything. I don't think she even touches anybody. She might have brushed someone's cheek at one point. But she just kind of there's a scene where the ghost is just kind of chilling with two characters while they smoke and watch their two friends beat each other to death. While they talk about, oh no, this is the part in the horror movie where one of our friends is going to lose it and beat the other one to death. It's a shame there's nothing we can do to stop it. It makes no sense. It is so frustrating. If you want an example, this is something we've been throwing. This is something we've been throwing around at the house. One of the examples of the writing in here. There's a point where someone says, if her hands were like birds, then they would have broken. What? I don't get it. I don't understand. This is not a good book. It's not a good book, but it could be funny. You could enjoy it and you could read it and understand how it could have been better. Even the author in their afterwards kind of mentions how they have a thank you to their editor, and they talk about how the editor helped them realize that their story needed a lot of work before it went out for publishing. And I think it still needed work. I think there is something in here. I think there is a story that could have worked where some friends go to, this abandoned old cabin in Japan and creepy things start happening and things get out of control. But this wasn't it. It's mercifully short at just over 100 pages. So, if you're a glutton for punishment, you're going to pick it up just out of curiosity. Know that you're not going to take a whole lot of time on it, which is good. But yeah, I gave this 1 star, and I think this year, has had more 1 stars than my previous 2 years, 3 years combined. It was not good. I would not recommend it. Unless you just want to do it to like I did because of morbid curiosity and because you'll get kind of a kick out of maybe telling people how ridiculous it is. Yeah, I'm not a fan. Sorry. That's going to bring us to the close of another Summerween season. I had a lot of fun this year with Summerween. Got some things off of my 26 for 2026 list. Picked some stuff up that I've been wanting to read for a long time. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about readathons is they push you to pick up things and read some maybe outside of your comfort zone, but also to bring in some things that maybe you had been interested in and just were putting off, and now you've got a week or you've got a theme to run with. So it can be a lot of fun. But let me know down in the comments if you participated in Summerween this year. What did you read? Don't forget to comment, and subscribe so we can grow this corner of our booktube community. And until the next one, take care.